Welcome to this TLC session on data dashboards. And let me first say, over the course of an hour, there's no way we're going to learn everything we need to learn about data dashboards. So this is more of an introduction of what's currently available. And Dan has put the presentation into the chat.
I will. I'm doing it now.
Oh, okay, he will. Yeah, Dan wears many hats, so I'll let Janet in. So I'll go ahead and get going here. Okay. I don't know why it's not letting me move. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I like to begin with a land acknowledgement. So please read along with me. We acknowledge that we occupy the traditional ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish tribe, a people who are still here, continuing to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering, dialogue, and learning space. We ask that we take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land who are still here. So in terms of contents, I want to start with some dashboards that are, I think, fairly new. So first of all, a demographics and outcomes dashboard, then a student FTE dashboard, something called a PhilCap wait list. And then I've got some information about dashboards in development in the Seattle College District, and then closing with some dashboards that are available through the SBCTC. So I'm going to go ahead and go forth with the presentation, and Dan is going to monitor chat. And if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to ask. And as Dan said, we'll hopefully have some time at the end for some Q&A as well. So for all of these dashboards, I include how to access them. So these are the links to the demographics and outcomes dashboards for each of the three sister institutions. So these are the categories of data that are available in these particular dashboards. So again, don't want to necessarily read to y'all because you can all read, but let's take a look at some screenshots. So when you open up this dashboard for North, this is what you see. And I tend to like label things like mad because I'm kind of a visual learner. So where you see data tabs, those are the various tabs that are available. And the little participant, you are screen sharing, stop share is kind of covering up that for me right now. But this was a dashboard developed by Catherine Hinkleman at South Seattle College, and I guess you could say that Catherine is the preeminent person in terms of developing data dashboards using Tableau. So here's the landing page continued. So you can, I think I highlighted that to show what's at the bottom of the screen more than anything. And then one thing that I think is very good that Catherine put in here is a how to use tab. So she's got some suggestions for use, like identify disparities in program code based on color coding. And by that, I mean this, this convention she has where you see like these horizontal bars going from underrepresented to overrepresented. So we'll kind of dig into this a bit further. So here's an example of the basis for the over and underrepresented. So across the top here, you see students of color compared to white students. And unfortunately, we still face a lot of missing data in terms of student race and ethnicity, and that makes it at times hard to analyze. And in terms of what the basis is for under and overrepresented, so if you see here for the grand total, hopefully y'all see my cursor moving around. So students of color account for 48% of the students. And then for students lacking a program, they account for 45%. So they're represented within that category about what you would see in the general population. The white students account for 33% of the students. And as you can see here, they're underrepresented among, unknown, unknown EPC title. And then the students who we do not have any race and ethnicity information for, they're overrepresented here, 18 in the general population versus 33% here. So, and this kind of follows through every program you can think of. So you can highlight the program code. And let me let Minder in to focus on a specific program. Okay. For some reason, let me see if this will work to advance this. Okay. So here we have AA transfer students here. So here we see, and I think this might be more of an FTE view because we have fractions of students, which you can't have in real life. So AA transfer for students of color, they're again the overall representation in the population is 48%, and here they're 56% of AA transfers. The white is somewhat overrepresented, 33 versus 35. And then the students who we do not know their race or ethnicity, they're underrepresented. So again, more of, gee, how do I interpret this? One thing that's, and I'm gonna get some water really quick. Because as we all know, hydration is important when one is using one's voice. So percent of annualized FTEs by race, ethnicity. What I want to highlight here is the race ethnicity categories, and the under or over representation is based on the quarter. So B67, B78, B89, those are the former, prior to CTC link conventions for designating a quarter. So so B relates to the 2000s, maybe even to the 2000 teens. So we're able to see some trends here. And again, what I would encourage everyone attending to do is once you get the presentation, you'll get the links to all of these dashboards. So I would definitely encourage you to go into these dashboards and play with them. So one thing Catherine built into this is the hover over feature. So in this case, I hovered over Asian for quarter B67, which I think means fall of 2016, 2017, because A is summer and B's fall. And it'll show you the annualized FTEs and percentage change. I think that's what the 10% is. Okay. Something else that Catherine built into this is the percent of total annualized FTEs by race ethnicity, and you can again specify specific program codes. So in this case, I'm checking off the BAS and International Business program. And I believe this list of programs includes every program across the district. I don't think it's just a North Seattle thing. So here's what things look like for enrollment in our BAS in International Business at North. So and again, I think the thing to keep in mind, and I don't quite show it very well here, is for many students, we don't know their race or ethnicity. And so it looks like Asian identified students account for 32% of FTEs in fall 17-18 and 39% in fall 18-19. And I think the thing to remember as you look at these numbers is to think of the size of the program, because I don't think, I'm not quite sure what the size of the International Business program is, but I don't think it numbers in the hundreds. So the point of that is things can look like they're like, oh my gosh, but again, keep in mind sample size. I think the one other thing I would say about all of these dashboards is it takes time to make them look all nice and pretty like this. And while Kyle and I are dedicated to learning as much about Tableau as we can, it's a skill that's got a learning curve to attain. Okay. Again, we have the hover over feature on the line graphs. So among students, again, in the BAS and International Business program, who indicate they are of 2 or more race ethnicity categories, they account for, I think, the 8, maybe I'm like, anyway, so let me just sort of stop there and say this has a hover over feature. Some of these numbers look kind of wonky here, but again, just wanted to show you all this. Let's see, did I go backwards? We can also take a look at this by gender. And, you know, as somebody who identifies as transgender, it's kind of difficult to deal with the unknown category because I know some students don't specify a gender because they don't know how the information is going to be used. But in general, 53% of our students identify as female and 45% identify as male, and then we have 2% missing data. Now, let me also say that you know, as a trans woman, if I were given this kind of scale, I'd probably pick female. So not all of these folks who identify as male or female are necessarily cisgender folks. So so this is just another way to filter the data in these dashboards. So again, you can highlight a particular program code. So in the case of the undecideds, female identified people are underrepresented, and the quick way to kind of eyeball that is across the total population, they account for 53% of enrollment. but only 47% of undecided, whereas male identified folks are overrepresented. Again, comparing the overall, grand total with what's specific to undecided students. Again, you can do a filter by age group, which is kind of cool. And, the word on our student body is that it tends to be a little older. The last time I saw a number cited was our average age is around 30 years old. So, and age is also something that students seem more comfortable letting us know about. So again, when you look at the sort of orange to blue thing, and again pointing at the null or no program code listed, under 20, slightly underrepresented, 20 to 29 slightly underrepresented, 30 to 29 underrepresented, but 40 and over overrepresented. So comparing the 27% to the 17%. So one thing I like about this particular dashboard is it enables you to interpret the findings, and that in turn can lead to more questions like, why are our students who are 40 and above more likely to not have a program code? Is that like they don't know what program to indicate, or is it a data question where someone has not entered a program code? And let me check the time here. And the same kind of thing here in terms of, in this case, I've highlighted accounting as a program code. So again, students 30 to 29 to 30 and 40 and above are overrepresented in those categories. I know when I was in my 20s taking accounting, it didn't make a lot of sense. So maybe if I were taking it now as an older person, it would make more sense. One thing I think data like this shows us is sort of the what exists out there. It doesn't necessarily tell us the why, and that's sort of the beginning point for the data. I say here EPCs with small n should be interpreted with caution. So, and really the rule of thumb I heard in all of my stats classes was you want to have it at least 30 to be able to make any sense of it. So this is employed headcount by program. So, so for this one here, accounts payable, receivable clerk. So a good way to lie with statistics is to say, wow, 100% of them are employed. But if you look at the number, then that tells a different story. I feel more comfortable with, say, associate degree nursing students, where you have 620 and 84% of them are employed. And more of the small n's. So I want to highlight this category here among filters. So, and if there's anybody from workforce instruction on the call, please check my definition. But I understand early leavers are folks who have left a Prof Tech program before they have attained enough skill and credits to get a job with their studies. So that's certainly an area of concern. Let's see, what else? This might be more of the, oh, and then you can also specify the year. Again, the B is from the old nomenclature for quarter and year. So this goes through fall of 2017, 2018. more small and EPCs. And in this case, I've just clicked on since 2013, 2014 through 2017, 2018. I'm going to try to scoot on through this one so we can move to another one. Okay, so we currently have 2 enrollment dashboards. So what I'm finding is a key to understanding the data is knowing where to find it. And this might be the fault of data folks, but sometimes we don't put stuff in the most easily findable places. In fact, I think my arrows have dropped here. So this should be pointing to where it says enrollment reports. So when you click enrollment reports at Inside Seattle Colleges, you see this heading. And again, this is, Catherine Hinkleman and her magic here. So we have an FTE report and something called the PhilCap wait list. And what the PhilCap wait list tells us is how many students have enrolled in a specific course section compared to what the maximum is, and also if there is a wait list. But I think I'm going to start out with the FTE report. Again, you can filter based on the term, and by institution, I mean North, South, or Central. For academic career in CTC Link, there's only undergraduate or continuing ed, so they're all going to be undergraduate. And I don't know why the screen on my laptop tends to cut this off here, but this at least gives you an idea of what it looks like when you open it up. So you see the institution, it's not been filtered by institution yet, so it starts with Central alphabetically. As I said, academic career is going to be all undergraduate. Group, art, design, and graphics. And then we get into the division. And then the subject, and hopefully we'll get some more insight out of this from these next few slides. I guess I should pause here. Are there any questions so far? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move along here. One thing else that's kind of neat here is looking at enrollment by quarter start date. So this should be like no surprise to most folks. So before the quarter starts, we don't see much in the way of enrollment activity. But as we get closer to start date, whoa, my gosh, it goes up way high. So this shows enrollment by start date by institution. So with us being Tree Frogs, we are the green line. And I think Central being Tigers, they're the orange line. And I don't know why South, who are the, oh, I think it's the other way around. So yeah, so Central is the yellow one, and then the orange one is South. And you see some drops once the start date happens as people drop or are dropped. Same kind of thing here, quarterly FTEs by registration date. And let's see what, oh, this is previous year comparison. So I believe this number here, the 10,866, that was the prior year. And as you can see, we're off by, in this case, 1,600 FTEs. So this is comparing winter 21 with winter 20. So here's the FieldCap wait list. So this shows you enrollment in courses and the enrollment cap. And this also now contains the instructor name. So the reason I'm guessing why you see an instructor's name listed twice is there's a lab portion to go with the lecture portion. As we can see for this particular course here, the 102, there's no instructor name, so it's listed as null. So so it's not like somebody's first name is null and you see them listed a lot. And as of the time I took this screenshot, no one had enrolled in that course. So that's why there's the zeros. So here's the student profile dashboard at the district office. And I've got a comment here. Note that this is current only through fall of 2019. As some of you may know, we're still down several head count among the IR staff in the district. And some of you who knew Victor Kuo remember how he suddenly, unexpectedly, and tragically passed away in, pretty soon after the pandemic started back in 2020. So we just haven't had basically the bodies to throw against this to make it more updated. The other thing to point out is, of course, we all know CTC Link happened in February of 2020. So that's another kind of confounding factor in updating this dashboard. But if you're looking for some historic data, this would be a good source. In terms of dashboards that are being developed, I just want to say very quickly that the district has contracted with a vendor called OneNumber to develop a placement dashboard and a program success dashboard. And we still have some leftover funding from state guided pathways funding. So we're looking to work with them on some additional dashboards.
Stephanie, Brian has a question. I think that was relevant to a previous slide. So I'm gonna bring your attention to it.
Okay.
Or David Eberhardt actually does. David, do you want to ask that question verbally?
Yeah, if I can find the off switch for the mute. So the other day I was looking at the FTE report, and we had several classes listed where the instructor was listed as null, but the class actually has an instructor assigned to it. And I was just wondering if you had any idea what might be causing the system to show the report as the instructor not being assigned when there is an instructor assigned.
So my best guess with that, David, is so often with data, a lot depends on the recency of the data and when the data were in the system. So I don't know when the instructor's name was put into CTC Link, but it might be a case where the instructor was brought on board after the dashboard was created for a given term. I can certainly follow up with Catherine Hinkleman, who developed those dashboards, but that's my guess in terms of why a course with an actual instructor is shown in the dashboard as null. A lot of times the dashboard is sort of a point in time kind of thing, but
Well,
If you could-
all of the instructors were assigned at the same time
Hmm.
and were input at the same time.
So David, here's my request of you. If you could email me the example of what you're talking about, then I can ask the person who created the dashboard for you and get back with you.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, again, I don't have an explanation for that other than what I had said already. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, sure enough. Are there other questions before we kind of go toward the end? Okay, so let me see if I can move back to where I was. So I just want to highlight here some dashboards that are available through the SBCTC. So I don't have a lot of screenshots here. It's more giving the name and what's included. So there's a progress and completions dashboard that the state maintains. And this shows all of the member institutions across the system. So we have credentials awarded, Perkins dashboard. And for those who might be new on the call, Student Achievement Initiative or SAI points, that's like a performance-based funding system that the state has created. And unfortunately, schools with a large proportion of part-time students like we have tend not to show up too well in that kind of system. There's also a strategic enrollment dashboard that the SBCTC maintains. And it includes a definitions tab, enrollment by college, enrollment trends, and enrollment summary. And I've got the web address there. Something that I've found very useful is this faculty and staff data dashboard. So this is where you can go and find out. And again, for those of you who are faculty, this does not list faculty names or anything like that. But if you want to find out what the race ethnicity makeup of your employees are, you can go to this website. And then that's it for that. And I'm going to stop share so we can see each other.
And I added the PowerPoint again to the chat, just because I know people, if you're not in Zoom when something like that first gets shared, you can't see it. So any of you who arrived late, there's another copy of the PowerPoint presentation for you in the chat.
So I see there is some activity in the chat. Are there any questions?
Oh, I was going to say, do you want to introduce Kyle?
Oh, sure. So I'll do the lead in, Kyle, then you do your part, then I'll do the wrap up like we've been doing. So Kyle, this is now day 2 of week 2 of Kyle's career at North Seattle College. So over to you, Kyle.
Yeah, nice to meet you, everyone. So I'm the new senior research analyst working for Stephanie. I came here from doing my graduate work at the University of Pittsburgh. I sort of took a path through my career. I started out in physics and math, and then through my graduate work ended up doing physics education research, which ultimately led me over to institutional research here. So I am really looking forward to getting to know all of you and helping out with all of your needs.
Thank you, Kyle. So well, let me say that, you know, Kyle is currently going through that phase that folks in the South like to call drinking water from a fire hose. I'm sure that that expression exists in other parts of the country, but probably not said with the Southern pronunciation like a fire hose. So Kyle is getting up to speed on PS Query. I'm working with my colleagues in the district so that Kyle can get up to speed on SQL to run queries that are not necessarily in PS Query. And we're also looking to get Kyle some training in Tableau, and I'll be right there with him because I want to expand my knowledge base in these more technical areas as well. So having said that, what I'm requesting of folks is for now and until some point in the future, if you have data requests, if you would please let me know what those requests are. So that as Kyle's manager, I can, manage his workload and, not scare him off because we're just burying him with all these data requests. So we're all glad to have Kyle here. I mean, I figure anybody who's got a PhD in a STEM field has got to be a pretty bright guy. So, and one kind of interesting fact. So, so Kyle and his wife were recently apartment searching in the area around North Seattle College, and I come to find out, guess who's going to be my new next door neighbor? Like literally the apartment right next door, Kyle and his wife. So so yeah, it's like the odds of that happening are like about zero, I
Well, you guys
guess.
can work way late into the night. You can.
Don't give her
Well,
ideas, Dan.
well, one thing I've stressed is, work is work. Let's see, David, I see your question in chat. I'm going to ask you please to email me that as well. I turned 63 this past summer, and y'all are supposed to say, gee, Stephanie, you don't look a day over 62, but I can start to play that old card a little bit more. So, please email me, stephanie.dykes@seattlecolleges.edu. So in terms of data availability, there's sort of like data from various data sources in CTC Link. Then there's the blessed by the SBCTC data, which is like, the measure against which we compare ourselves. So SBCTC always has a lag time after the end of a given quarter to produce like the official data. So some years they're better than that than others. So, but if you could just, again, email me that question, I'll try to respond that way.
Okay, yeah, I will do that. It's just that we're required to do our program review coming up in winter quarter. And the data that's currently available is only through the academic year 2018, 2019.
Thank you, David. And last week, Kyle and I met with Kelda Martinson of the Program Review Committee. So we're very much aware of the data needs of program review. And if we don't know it ourselves, we're going to reach out to everyone we know for the answer, because this is something I know is very, very important.
Okay. And by the way, I would have said not a day over 49, but
well, you get a gold star, David. Thank you so much. So any other questions?
Well, I mean, I guess one might be burning on people's minds. So we have this data dashboard right now, which kudos to everyone who helped develop it, because it's going to be a very useful tool. And you used the term before the meeting, democratizing data. Kind of like, do you want to talk a little bit more about democratizing data and how this tool can alleviate some of your workload so that you can focus on other data needs? And I guess tied in with that, with Kyle, in his new position, clearly he's trying to drink all that water that's being sprayed at him. But he, eventually he's going to start getting requests for data, and what's the protocol for that?
Right. So that's
3 questions probably.
Yeah. So let me first address that term, democratization of data. That's certainly not something I came up with on my own. I think it's been out there for a while. And I know in the past, even here at North, if somebody wanted a piece of data, they'd have to approach the senior research analyst, or they would approach me, and then your request would get added to the queue. And I wish I could say that all data requests are created equal, but if I get a request from the president of the college versus somebody else, yeah. So I report to the president, and she's kind of like the head of our little food chain. So they would probably, she'd probably get the higher priority. With this sort of explosion of the number of data dashboards out there, and also with PS Query, which is the replacement for Data Express that many of y'all might remember from the old system. Those are both ways to kind of, make anybody who has an interest somebody who can pull data and answer their own questions. You still might need some help with how to interpret it because, like I said before, there was that one program that had one graduate, so they were able to say that 100% of their graduates were employed. And that's sort of an extreme case, but my hope is that with these data dashboards and making people aware of them, people will be able to answer their own questions, respond to their own data needs. And I hope folks will find that kind of empowering because, right now the data is sort of like this closely held secret by the chosen few who work in institutional research. And the problem with that, in addition to lots of frustration on the parts of data requesters, is, it makes things kind of like unapproachable. And, whereas if you can find a dashboard to answer your needs, then, you're empowered, you have the ability to get that data yourself. So, so that kind of responds to one part of Dan's question, and I'll pause to see if anybody wants to add anything to that, or Kyle, if you want to add anything to that.
I guess I would just add that I'm a big proponent of open access to data, so I'm very happy to work towards those goals.
Thank you, Kyle. So part of the process that we're doing internally here in institutional effectiveness is we're like documenting everything. So that's why when I did that presentation just now, I listed the web link to it because, if I don't list the web link, well, we're back to where we were, this, undemocratic use of data. But now you've got the web links and you can go look for yourself. Again, not that we're saying, we're going to desert you in your hour of need, but this will at least help you get started. So one of the other questions I heard you ask, Dan, was sort of the management of workflow kind of question.
Yeah.
So I've created a draft data request form. And I know we haven't used one of those here before. It was more a matter of somebody going down to the senior research analyst's office and saying, hey, I need this by this date. But I don't think that works very well from a workflow management standpoint. So I've got a few more edits to make to that form. And I'll probably create it as a SurveyMonkey survey, at least initially, and it'll be just a link so that if you want to go there and make multiple requests, you can. And the vision for this form is it asks basic questions that we would ask you anyway. Like, is this a one-time data request or will it be recurring? What's your population of interest? What's the purpose of this data? Because, very often in the research world, it's kind of common to hear a data user say something like, wouldn't it be nice to know blah, 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 blah. So, if we had unlimited resources, we could spend all of our time answering nice to know kind of questions, but we're now at a point and we've long been at a point where we have limited resources. So that's sort of like hitting a pause button a little bit and asking the requester to, stop and think about why you really need this information. And maybe they don't. Maybe they don't need information from us. So so anyway, once I finalize this form, I'll need to publicize the link and where it is. So I'll probably start out, from the leadership and kind of trickle it on down to the deans and department chairs and things like that. Was there any other part of your question, Dan?
No, that was it. That was it.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure enough. Hey, Curtis, is that a question?
Yeah, quick question. And mostly I put it in the chat. Good to see you again, Kyle, by the way. The wish list for me on that PhilCap wait list, I would love to be able to somehow sort that by cluster or combined classes, since so many classes in my division are combined. ESL is combined with ABE, but it's hard to tell without doing two separate runs how many students are in that class because they have different prefixes and stuff. So
Yeah.
if there's any way to let the district, whoever is in charge of that, know, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and again, as I was saying to David earlier, Curtis, if you could email that to me, so I've got like this written record.
Will do.
Yeah. One thing I noticed when I saw that, when I was looking at the PhilCap data from last night was, gee, this could help me answer a question I've received from somebody on, what percentage of enrollments are for, some form of virtual instruction, because, you can filter based on learning modality. So, so of course, with that, I've got to like dedupe those classes that have a lab tied to it, because otherwise you're like double counting. But I appreciate you bringing that question forward, Curtis, because we're supposed to be organizations dedicated to continuous improvement and listening to the end user. So, yeah, if any of you all on this Zoom have a thought on how something can be improved, please contact one of us. I hate to kind of say ideally in writing, but that way there's a record of it, and we can go back to it and kind of talk with you about, is this what you really meant? That kind of thing. Other questions or comments? I guess one final thing I would add is once Kyle and I are sufficiently up to speed on PS Query, I can see that being another topic for a TLC session, because this might sound silly, but earlier today I ran my first successful query and I was just so thrilled. And of course there's thousands of queries out there, but I think if we can communicate where the data are and how to get the data, that'll just make us all very data driven.
Well, thanks, Stephanie.
So Brian Palmer, what was that comment about? You've not had what happen yet?
I have not run a successful query in PeopleSoft yet.
Oh.
I've run some where results have listed, but I don't know what to do with them.
Well,
Being funny.
Well, maybe I can send you. I was so thrilled that it actually ran. I did like a screen capture of all the screenshots to make it happen, and it's like, oh my gosh, this really works. So. But Kyle and I are happy to talk with you about the results of your queries, and we're happy to talk with you about the data you find from dashboards. And if we can't answer your questions immediately, we'll go to both our colleagues in the district and across the system to see if we can find an answer for you. So I'll mute now, Dan, and you can kind of take us on out of here.
Oh, well, I just want to say thank you, Stephanie and Kyle, for this presentation. That was definitely informative, and I hope to use this tool too. And we'll definitely have you back to continue teaching us on about how to use the dashboards and other data stuff.
Well, thanks so much, and we look forward to meeting with y'all again. So have a good rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.